Hey guys, I'm Jax and this is my spoiler review for the fifth and final episode of Black Mirror Season 6. So the first thing that struck me about this episode of Black Mirror is that whilst it is technically an episode of Black Mirror because it's in the show called Black Mirror, it is not what I would consider an episode of Black Mirror. And what I mean by that is that every single episode of Black Mirror, even though they're all so different and in different universes, and different tones and all this stuff, they all have the central connecting theme of humanity and technology. And is the technology bad, or is it that man misuses the technology? And some kind of twist on that in all the 50 different ways that he's done in all these different episodes. But there's always some form of technology, whether it be sci-fi futuristic stuff, or if it's just like iPhones and Twitter or Netflix or whatever it is, it's always somehow to do with a sci-fi element of technology and man and kind of the dangers and the horrors of that. Whereas this episode is just like a horror episode. Like, it's just an episode of The Twilight Zone. It's so weird. Like, it's just a horror episode thing. Like, it's essentially just made a horror movie. Essentially, this is just, what if Charlie Brooker watched M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin and just went, yeah, I'll just do that. That sounds good. I'll just do that. And that's not a bad thing. I thought this episode was mostly amazing. I have some issues with the end, but also I kind of love the end. So I don't know, we'll get to that. But overall, I found this episode to be really engaging, a really fun, amazing idea. But it just doesn't feel like a Black Mirror episode. The only thing that really makes this episode feel like a Black Mirror episode and feel like a Season 6 Black Mirror episode is that it has a twist at the end. Every single one of these episodes has a big twist at the end. It is a really fascinating character study of someone who is dealing with isolation, loneliness, mental health, and racism. For so much of the episode, I just kept sitting there being like, I love how every single time she's talking to the demon in public, we just get these horrifying, just chilling wide shots where she's just, I don't know, the performance from this lead actress is stunning. She's so upsetting and she's so unhinged and you feel sympathy towards her, and you know, she is kind of trying to kill bad people, but also the first 10 minutes is someone who is dealing with some really harsh circumstances and you can see that she's kind of snapped. And so I found it really fascinating to keep looking at it as if the demon isn't there. And then we kept cutting to these wides and you could totally see it. There was like, oh, well, the demon's just invisible because only the person who touches the talisman can see her. But I just found the way it kind of bounced back and forth where it's a really fun horror demon supernatural episode where this demon comes out and it's like a demon out of a genie bottle. She touches a thing and this magical entity comes out and is like, hey, instead of 3 wishes, you've got to kill 3 people. Otherwise the world will end. And if you're watching it like that, it's really fun and fascinating. And it's also kind of just like, there's a lot going on just with that. Because it's like, one, she's taking the demon for his word that like the world will end. That's kind of crazy. He doesn't really show or explain anything that kind of makes you go, oh, okay. Like he shows the television at one point and he's like, look, it's happening. But that could just be coincidental. And he keeps showing her visions of all these people being like, hey, this guy's pretty bad. He's doing all this bad stuff. But it's just visions he's showing her. Like we don't know any proof of those visions. He could just be a demon that can like put thoughts in people's minds. And I just like the way that he's slowly trying to corrupt her. And as he says, she is someone who is corruptible. And so it's like this really fun kind of thing of him trying to kind of make her kill these people who are awful people, but mostly don't really deserve it. And so it's like this really awful twisted game this demon's playing. But then on the other hand, it's like, has she just gone insane? Is she just using this demon, this vision that she's just having to kind of like make excuses for the fact that she hates her life and she hates the people around her, and instead of like quitting her shoe job and moving somewhere else and trying to break free of like how awful her life is, she's just snapped and she's like, I'm just gonna murder everybody. And so it's a really fun kind of back and forth throughout the whole episode, and I found it super engaging, super interesting. And for most of the episode, I really enjoyed the idea that she was just crazy and that this demon wasn't there, and that was like the whole episode. I'm like, I'm calling it. I'm calling it. The demon is not real. And it's so funny because it's like, usually I love demons and monsters and creatures and wacky stuff. Like, I'm happy for it to be a demon. It's not that I don't want it to be supernatural and crazy. I just think it's such a fun, interesting way to tell this story of this woman who's dealing with all these things and snaps and goes crazy. And it kind of just adds a fun lens over it. but it's going to create a tragic, horrible twist at the end when we realize that she has just completely lost it. And of course, the world isn't going to end, because that's insane. Like, why does this one demon who has a talisman, like, why does when you open the talisman, suddenly, like, the world's going to end? Suddenly there's a 3-day ticking time bomb clock that's going off and we have to kill these 3 people? Like, it's so vague, it's so random, it's like, surely that's nonsense. And so the episode ends and it gives us both. And I found that at first to be really exciting, and then at the end when it switches it back, I found that to be kind of annoying. Like, so at first, it's like, hey, she's clearly crazy. Like, her talisman is just like a domino piece. There's no talisman symbols on it. The demon seems to be gone. And it feels like we've come back to reality a little bit. Like, nothing changes in the way everything's filmed, but it feels like suddenly we're just like, oh, we're getting, like, this is the reality. Every time we cut to those big wides where she's just muttering by herself and looking creepy and terrifying, that was the reality. She's just completely lost her mind. The demon was never real. She's just snapped. All the things that the episode has been about and it's been exploring, it all comes to the forefront, and we have these really sad moments. But then, as the cop says, it's like, yeah, you can feel a lot of empathy towards her, he says to the other cop. But she killed a bunch of people, and they've got a bunch of family who now are mourning. And I'm like, yeah, that's why this is such a good, rich episode. And then, as the cops are saying this, and it's all like, oh, she was imagining it, she's just crazy. The nukes go off, which have been teased throughout the episode. The nukes go off, and they all die. They all explode in fire, like the demon said they would. And so suddenly the demon's back, and he's like, hey, I'm back. Also love the costume for the demon. Really, really funny. Just that first visual where it's like, what is this? I mean, I can work with it, but what is this? Very funny, and a great contrast to the rest of the episode's, like, color palette, which was very, like, orange and brown and kind of grossly muted. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but it had a very kind of vibe, and he was popping out, and I really like that contrast. So he rocks back up and he's like, hey, I'm the demon, everything was real, do you want to come to infinite darkness and horrors, or whatever he says? Like, they're going to go and live in the abyss forever, because he also failed, because they were meant to stop the apocalypse. Even though he's a demon, so it seems like they'd like that. I don't know, it's a little unclear. The world building's a little, because for the whole episode, you kind of meant to think she's gone crazy. And so they walk off hand in hand, and they're like, we're going to go have fun in horrible abyss. And at first, like, my first feeling and reaction as I realized, oh, the demon was right, was kind of annoyed. Like, I was kind of annoyed, I was kind of frustrated, kind of a bit like, I do not like that. Like, just the visceral first reaction is like, nope, no. I like the fact that we were using this demon and having a lot of fun with their interactions and all this stuff, but that was just like a part of her psyche that she'd, like, split off and was having conversations with. I like the fact it wasn't real, because once it's real, it's like, why does this talisman exist like this? Why was it in that house? This doesn't make any sense. Like, why is this one little talisman, when you touch blood on it, suddenly you need 3 deaths in 3 days or the world ends? The whole world? And it just feels too extreme. They don't do anything. Like, it's very similar to the very basic starting premise of M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin, but I feel like they explore really interesting themes of religion and, like, faith and questioning faith, and there's so much at play with that, whether it's true or not true, that film does, and it goes back and forth the whole movie, and I think that explores it way better, even though I do think the end of that movie could be tweaked and made better. I think that whole film, because that's the basic premise of that film as well, it goes back and forth in really interesting ways, and it kind of explores them in different ideas, whereas in this one, I just have more questions, and I don't think it really tries to explore anything other than this personal story that feels like the kind of the slow, like, descent into madness of one woman due to all the things that are going on in her life. And so to have the demon just kind of, I don't know, to have the demon be real, I feel like doesn't really work for me. But then I kind of sat on it for a little bit. And I sat on it for the day as I went to work. I was just thinking about it every now and then when I got a little time to myself. And I think I've come back around on it. And the reason that I've come back around on the ending, the reveal, or the potential reveal that the demon in fact was real, is that even though we see the demon again, he's like, hey, I'm back, whoopity boo, there is no concrete evidence to actually support the fact that the demon was real and that the nuclear explosion that kills them all was the result of her not killing that one person. So I think that ambiguity at first doesn't seem clear because like it's like, oh, she was like hallucinating. Oh, she clearly wasn't. But I think her seeing the demon at the end and then walking off into the abyss or whatever as the world erupts into fire and the nuclear explosion like kills them all can be read either way. Like in one way you're like, well, no, the demon appeared, so clearly demon real. Or, which I kind of like more, she just like hallucinates again and sees the demon. Like there's no reason that she would stop hallucinating once they tell her she's crazy and they go, hey, look, you're crazy. She would just be like, no, I'm not. And suddenly like the demon appears again and she's like, and the demon starts talking nonsense to her again. And so she walks off thinking she's going to live in the darkness of abyss or whatever, which sounds horrible. Why would you do that? Just burn it into a crisp. That sounds just cleaner. Just, living in the abyss forever just sounds awful. And so she explodes into fire thinking the demon's real, but the demon never was real, and the world was going to end if she had done nothing. And I think that way I like that more, but I still don't really love the idea that the nuclear explosion came and just killed everybody. Because then it was also, I don't know, I'm still mixed on it. I still feel a little weird about it, like just the way it ends, it's just so like, what? But I feel less annoyed at it in the way that I feel like it's still ambiguous whether or not the demon is real or not. Which is why I loved the episode so much of it, for like 90% of it, because you could just read it either way. But I think it's more interesting if the demon isn't real, because I think that's more of an interesting character study. Overall, I thought this was a really good episode, and probably my second favorite of the season. Even though, as I said, it's not really a Black Mirror episode, it's just like a horror movie that's like not the full length of a movie. Yeah, pretty good. Overall, season 6 of Black Mirror I found to be a mixed bag. Probably the worst one. Although people don't like 5, but I really liked that Smithereens episode where Moriarty is like the Uber driver. He's on the phone trying to get the call from Eric from that 70s show, who's playing Mark Zuckerberg or something. Like, I really liked that episode, and I have not seen the Miley Cyrus one for a while, but I remember defending that. I remember being the only person in the world who liked that episode. So yeah, I think this might be my least favorite season, but like every season of Black Mirror, even the first one with that bicycle episode, there are hits and there are misses. There are some episodes that are brilliant and some episodes that are okay. And so I think this season is kind of more of the same in that way, but probably one of the weakest seasons. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment below. I would love to know, what did you think of this episode of Black Mirror?